Those of you that know me, I'm not going to make a long speech. I've got a couple of notes here. I'm going to talk in general, sketch a bit of economic stuff and talk a bit about some of the stuff that we're doing. And then I'd rather get into discussion and into action, and so I can kind of maybe answer some questions that you've got. I can maybe deal with some of the hard issues that you're battling with. Perhaps if you're not being paid in 30 days, I'll leave you all my cell number. You can phone me anytime, because that's a commitment that we've made, not only from the province but nationally. That's a commitment made by our Budget Council through Pravin Gordon that we will pay on 30 days. And if we're not paying on 30 days, you let us know, because I promise you, if we're not paying on 30 days, the Auditor General is going to nail me at the end of the year. But so what am I going to talk about? Well, I've made a couple of notes, and I thought that perhaps what I should first of all talk about, and I never really know when I speak to business whether I should start off with this or not, because as you heard, I come from business. I started 10 companies myself. I know what it's like. I know those 3 o'clock in the mornings and you're battling to pay salaries at the end of the week. And I also know the other side of the story when you say, let's go on holiday to Mauritius at the end of the year. Well, let's sell a bit of extra stock and you make it happen. When you earn a salary, it doesn't work as well as that. Budgeting becomes much more of a day-to-day effort. But where do we find ourselves at the moment? And as South Africa and as the Western Cape, and I mean, you've all seen the downgrading in the US, you've all seen the Eurozone calamities day by day. Those of you that have got money on the stock markets were probably crying yesterday. It's affecting all of us. In South Africa, it really has a huge effect on us, even though we are so very, very far away from what is happening. And that is because our core markets are Europe and the US. And we're not diversifying quick enough. We're not moving into those new markets quick enough. The opportunities are all there. South Africa joining BRICS, excellent news, huge opportunity, but not easy to gain access to those markets just overnight. You know, we can have this agreement between governments, but you try and get into that market, it's not as easy as it looks. And if you look at the growth rates that are projected out of out of Europe and out of the US, they are minimal. I mean, France 0% projected going forward. The UK 1.7%, now downgraded to 1.1%. Germany is sitting at 0.5%. I'm sorry, I say 1 point. I mean 0.1% in the UK. And let's not even talk about the pigs. That it really is bad, and that's our market. And it's going to have another effect on us. And so the news is not good going forward. At the same time, if you have a look at where we are and looking into the new markets, and as I said, it's not that easy to get into those new markets, but if you have a look at where we are on the southern tip of Africa, and you look at the top 10 growing economies in the world, 7 of them come from Africa. 7 of the top 10 growing economies in the world in Africa, and we're not one of them. But we must be trading with those partners of ours. They're right here. I just last month led 73 businesses on a delegation to Angola. And sure, it's not easy to do business in Angola, but jeepers, the opportunities are unbelievable. You cannot believe what Angola imports from Portugal and Brazil. And we're 3 hours by flight, by air away. It's like going to Joburg from Cape Town. We need to do more business. There's a direct flight out of Cape Town into Luanda. How many of you are using that? How many of you are doing business? And it isn't easy. I promise you it's not easy. But Luanda is the most expensive city in the world. That already gives you a huge opportunity. When you pay 300 Rand for a pizza, there's huge opportunity. Every bottle of water that you drink is imported from Portugal or somewhere in Europe. Doesn't make sense. Come on, guys. Go and set up a bottling plant and go and start supplying water to the hotels. When you stand on the balcony of a hotel, you just see cranes everywhere. There's just construction going on. There's huge growth, and we need to be doing business with our neighbors. There's huge opportunity. And then, of course, there's the Chinas. You look at tourism, and you look at the 30% growth we're seeing out of China year on year. You look at all those new markets, India, Brazil. There's lots and lots of opportunity. So we've got to focus onto those new markets. But at the same time, I'm now going to talk to you as government. Now, as government, we are under severe pressure, specifically when it comes to delivering of our services, because we in the province are reliant on a division of revenue from national. We have very, very small own revenue generation. Very, very small. But of our 36 billion rand budget this year, 5% comes from own revenue generation, the rest of it comes from national. But at the same time, looking forward for the next year, Praveen's just done the medium-term budget policy statement, and he mentioned a number of 13 billion, which is the shortfall on tax collection so far this year. That's the shortfall on the budget. Now, what happens to that money? We've got to find it. Now, we've just also had at the same time higher than budgeted wage negotiations. Again, that has an impact on our service delivery as a government. And it doesn't matter what level you're at, the same thing applies. But let's not get stuck into too much of that. There's a slide that I use quite often, and I heard you call it a webinar. There's a Professor Matthew Lester from Rhodes University, and you must go and have a look at some of his seminars on tax. He's a tax professor. But he puts a slide up that talks about the 50 million people that live in South Africa. And I can't put it up on the wall here, but I'll just explain it to you. It's a pie chart. And it starts off with the first slither being 3%, and that's 1.4 million people who are disabled in our country. And I must say that's something that the Premier is jumping up and down on quite a lot at the moment, is about those disabled people who most often, not through doing anything themselves, have got this burden to carry. And specifically those families who have children who are disabled is a massive issue in South Africa, because those people hide those children away. And I know personally, because my wife is a volunteer with a newly established hospice in this region, and there are poor families who can't afford to look after these children. And do you know that a mother looking after a child who is really seriously disabled, and that's a 24/7 job, never ever gets to go to the dentist, never gets to go and have a cup of tea, never gets a minute off. And those kids aren't seen by us, and we're busy trying to work on new mechanisms to actually give relief to those parents. But that's 1.4 million people in South Africa are sitting in the disabled category. And how many of you are employing disabled people? And it's not easy. I know that in my department in Treasury, we've actually gone to Disability South Africa and said, please help us. We'll put the money into it to try and help employ more disabled people. And we all need to play our role there. But there are 2 million AIDS orphans in South Africa. There are 8 million children in South Africa that have no support whatsoever. 8 million kids. We've got 10 million children on a child support grant. So government is actually taking your taxpayers' money and putting them towards child support grants. We've got 2.5 million old age pensioners. We've got 4 million people who are unemployed looking for work. And we've got 10 million people who are unemployed that have stopped looking for work. They've given up. They've got no hope. They've stopped looking for work. So you take all of those numbers I've just mentioned, and that's 75% of South Africa. That's 3/4 of the bar chart. So the last little quarter that's left is made up of 9 million people who are employed but don't pay tax. They're below the tax threshold. Then we've got 3.5 million people who earn money and enough money to pay tax, but under 500,000 a year. And those earning over 500,000 a year, on the bar chart registers at 0%, but it's 150,000 people. Okay, this is what's registered. Okay, that's why Praveen's also asking a whole lot of questions, because if you have a look at the number of people that own Lear jets in South Africa versus the number of people paying tax, and if you think of 150,000 people who are earning over 500,000 rand a year and declaring it, I live in Knysna. And if I drive from Knysna, or let's start with Plettenberg Bay all the way to Cape Town, and you get all the way down to Camps Bay, I can't see where those 150,000 people, where the rest of them, because there's a whole lot of them that are getting away without paying tax. But anyway, that's not my problem. But the big issue here is that you've got a quarter of 25% of this pie chart that's contributing, and 75% of this pie chart that's a drain on the system. So my job is to say, how can I as government, and that's what I say to you now, and when we get into the discussion, what do you want me to do to make it easier for you to make money? Because I want you to pay more tax. Because when you're making more money and you're paying more tax, we take that pie chart and we bring it down to half. And that's where we need to be. We need half of our people at least contributing to the system. And the longer we stay with that small contribution, the bigger the risk going forward as a country. When of our 25% unemployment, when 75% of that 25% are young people under the age of 34 who can't get jobs, that's a huge risk. That should be a bottom line risk on all of your businesses. It should be something that the audit companies are saying, what are we doing about that? How are we looking to that as a risk? Because it's a massive risk. We had an investment from Kimberly Clark the other day. The Africa manager came to get this investment going here in Cape Town. They're going to be investing a couple of billion rand over the next few years into a factory here. And it was interesting because South Africans don't normally ask that question to me. But that's the first thing he said to me. He said, one thing about investing in this country that I'm worried about is your high unemployment rate. He said, because it's a risk to my business, to my investment. And we all need to start thinking about that. I know it's something that I've got to exercise my mind with day in and day out. So it's something that is really serious. There's something else that I want to just talk about before I talk about what we're doing in government. And that is, sometimes as government, we generally play around with things like pay productivity. We're sitting out of 138 countries, sitting at 112. Our rating is shocking. Productivity. When I hear you saying things about we're going to offer great customer service, we've all got to be doing this far more. We've got to be thinking about productivity, getting ahead of the game, being more efficient. Business has got to become more efficient. We're going down, we're not going up. And that's not good. So as government, we sit with that. We sit with our maths and science outcomes. 137 out of 139 countries rated in the world, that's where we sit. Our maths and science outcomes. 60% of our kids in our education system don't make it from grade 1 to matric. They drop out of the system. You can't grow your economy. I can't grow this economy. None of us can grow this economy if you've got 60% of our kids not making it. So that's what we have to exercise ourselves with as government every day. How do we change these things? How do we make ourselves and how do we spend your money more efficiently to change those outcomes? But I'm not going to spend any more time on the negative stuff because those are the bad outcomes and we've got to deal with it. I want to spend a bit of time on the positive stuff. And that is, and I think I'm going to start off with auditing. Seeing as we were invited here by an audit company. But South Africa is rated number 1 in the world for the strength of auditing and reporting standards. Number 1. So you heard earlier about all the hoops that you're going to all jump through over the next 5 years. It's good news, guys, because we're rated as number 1 in the world on our auditing standards. That's great. We're rated as number 2 in the world on our efficiency of our corporate boards. We rated 3rd in the world in protection of minority shareholders' interests. 7th in the world on effectiveness of anti-monopoly policy. We ranked 4th in the world on financing through local equities market. 2nd in the world on soundness of banks. We've just been speaking about Europe. We're 2nd in the world on the soundness of our banks. Okay, I keep on saying to them that soundness of banks rated 2nd on the world. That's their bank risk rating. But that means that, you might be ranked very hard, but I think they see that as also they're a bit risk averse, and we need to change that. And I think what you're talking about is starting that whole model of changing how we have to become more open to taking a bit more risk when it comes to our banking. But our banks are rated unbelievably well in the world. On regulation of securities exchange, 1 in the world. On legal rights, 8 in the world. So if you look at that World Economic Forum report, we've got stuff there that just sets us above anything else. And we must use those. I keep on saying to banks, I don't ever hear you bragging about that stuff. You should be bragging about it. We should all be bragging about that. That's the good stuff that says to people, come and invest here. Come and make business here because that's what we need to do. So I say that to everybody. We must actually go and brag about the good stuff more often. We must tell people this is a great place to do business. But then, of course, we've also got to make sure it's a great place to do business, and we've got to become more efficient. That is the big thing. Talking about money and how much do we spend, and the 30-day stuff, how much do we spend as a government? How much do we procure? Provincial government, 9 billion rand a year. Local government, that's all of our municipalities in this province, another 14 billion rand a year. So there it is. That's what we spend as government. Come and do business with us. Come and offer your services. And offer your services at a better and more competitive rate and be more competitive. Fight with each other. Go onto my website. Go and have a look at the Cape Gateway website. Go and have a look at every piece of equipment or service that we've bought Go and have a look if you can compete with those numbers. Go and have a look if you can compete, because that's what we've got to do. At the moment, we're going the other way. And I'm going to ask you if you have all gone through the process of accreditation, because on the 7th of December, the new supply chain rules and regulations are coming to place, which it doesn't get pointed out to me that often, fronting and etc. on how we actually go to market with our 9 billion. But this is going to make it far more efficient. It's going to make it that companies don't mess around. They've got to be accredited to be able to do business with us. And I will assure you that we will make sure that we hold our end of the bargain. But what I also say to specifically small companies, if we can use factoring to help you with spending, in helping us spend that 9 billion, let's do it. Let's make sure that we give you the opportunity to use government as a mechanism to get into the economy. But don't only use government. Get out there. The economy is much bigger than just government. I've got a 36 billion rand budget in the province. So we spend 36 billion rand every year. But that's a small piece of the bigger economy, the 250 odd billion, that's the GDPR of this region of South Africa. That's where we all need to be playing. And if specifically HDIs and emerging companies use the preferential system to get the contract from government, but then don't only stick in with that system in government. Use that as the leg up to go out and compete in the open market. Because we have to, as South Africa, become much, much more competitive in the world if we want to change how we go to market across the globe. Then, what else do I want to talk to you about? Let me just talk about one or two other things around where we want to go as a government. Our first strategic objective is about growth and jobs, and it was spoken about earlier. That's my job. How do we grow the economy and how do we create jobs? We've seen jobless growth in South Africa over the last while. How do we change that? And I think what's happening in the world today is actually starting to develop a new type of economy, a new way of going to market. I don't know what the answers are, but I think things are changing so drastically that we are going to be doing business differently. And let's use that opportunity right here in the southern tip of Africa to be ahead of the game in doing business differently. We can. We've got those kind of rankings that I've just spoken to. We've got the foundation and the basis to do it with. So let's do things differently. Let's be innovative. Let's be different. And let's go to that world market in a different way. From a government point of view, one of the projects we're busy with is called started off as the EDA, Economic Development Agency. It's now morphed into something a little bit different called the EDP, Economic Development Partnership, because one of the biggest problems that I've found as government, we've got, in my department, 2 public entities, CTRU, tasked with tourism, Westgrade, tasked with trade and investment, and 17 special purpose vehicles that are partnerships with some government money and bringing business around the table in sectors to try and grow the economy. Big problem. They don't all talk to each other. It's a big problem. But it's not only a problem in government. There are 51 business organizations in Cape Town. Different organizations that represents business. 51. Then I've got a meeting on Friday with Labour. We fill that boardroom with different Labour organizations. You can't believe it. So one thing in South Africa we do incredibly well. We all love our little egos and we form little organizations all over the place. We never think of the big picture and we don't manage to come together. We don't hunt in a pack. Praveen Gordon said the other day at a budget council, he said, and we are having this discussion, is how do we actually become a more competitive country? And he actually mentioned the words, he says, because we don't hunt in a pack. It's all about individual egos and creating our own little business organization. He says, just think of the French. When a French tourist comes to South Africa, when a French government official comes to South Africa, or when a French businessman comes to South Africa, they all ask one question. When are you buying our nuclear technology? They don't ask anything else. They focus. Doesn't matter who it is. When we go to market, we all ask about ourselves and not about South Africa. And we need to start, that's, I think, the first area. And that's why the EDP is about how do we bring everybody in this economy together to start saying, as an economy, what must we do differently? How must we go to market differently as an economy? In the process of leading up to where we are now, which is a process because it's it's part of consultation. And what I put on the table 8 months ago, or now 9 months ago, is a very different concept that's come up through consultation, which I'm quite proud of. I've got a couple of questions about it, and maybe I need to pull it back a little bit here and there. But it means that interaction with people out there, the model has changed, which says that I haven't come there with my idea and said, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be done. I've got all the answers. And there are very clever people out there that are much more clever than I am. So through this process, we're developing this partnership, and it is morphing into something that I think is going to be a mechanism that will pull everybody together in the economy, in the interests of the economy. But one thing that's come out, and that is, we did a study on brand. What is the brand of this region? What is this region's brand when it goes to market? So if you're sitting in India, you're sitting somewhere in Mumbai, and someone says to you, the Western Cape, the southern tip of Africa, Cape Town, what does it say to them in their minds? What brand is that? We're going to market with this brand. And we did this survey amongst not leading cities in the world. We used Cape Town versus other second economy cities in the world. And I've got the exact numbers here. We must get it in the process. But generally, Rio de Janeiro, Buenos Aires, Melbourne, and Cape Town, you find that a business versus leisure brand. In other words, leisure tourism versus hardcore economics. Business versus leisure. In all of those cities, Rio, you think, in my mind, Rio is a party place. But it's got quite a balance. It's got a kind of slightly overly powerful economic brand, sitting in the 45%, and in the 30% it's got a business brand. And so it's those kind of numbers in those cities that I've mentioned. In the city of Cape Town, 63% leisure brand. In the brains of people living in Gauteng or in Mumbai or in Washington, over 60% is a leisure brand. How much do you think the business brand is? 3%. 3% is our business brand. That's unacceptable. We have to change that. But why is it? Now this is where the tourism guys get cross with me. We give money to tourism. We give money to tourism from the city of Cape Town. We give money to tourism from every municipality in this province. And we give money to tourism from the provincial government. We also give money to business. But the city of Cape Town gave their tourism marketing body 40 million rand in this last budget. And Wesgro are going to be lucky to get 10 million. So you're giving 40 million to tourism marketing and 10 million to growing the economy, to the business brand. Does it make sense? Overall, we give taxpayers and ratepayers money to the economy of tourism and marketing of tourism in the province in excess of 130 million in the Western Cape. And we don't give 40 million to business promotion, trade promotion, growth of our exports. It doesn't make sense. So obviously we're going to end up with a strong leisure brand and a very weak business brand. So hopefully this is this is the directive that I want this EDP to start pulling together, to say it's actually about the economy. The whole lot is about the economy. Because to try and get tourism people to understand that 10% of our economy is tourism. It's a serious business. It's 10% of our economy. But it's not tourism separate. It's part of the economy. And this is another fight that we've got to have, and this is with my tourism hat. When I talk to the newspapers, how many of you read about tourism stuff in the business section of the newspaper? You don't. Tourism is always in the insert. It's in the glossy. It's about marketing and fluffy stuff. It's not about hardcore business, but it's 10% of our economy. It should be commanding 10% column centimeters in our business reports, in our business newspapers, in our business day. And it doesn't. But that's because, again, if we want to become serious about business, it doesn't matter whether you own a B&B or not. If you've got a B&B, you do that business seriously. You go and speak to your auditors. You don't crook the books, you do it properly. You make sure we take that business to market in a serious way. And that's what we've all got to start doing as South Africans, so we actually start, and in this region, let's grow this business economy. And part of this process as well, and I heard you saying you want to become the best supplier of office automation in Cape Town. I want you to please expand slightly, and I want you to start off with a thing called the city region. The city region is 5 municipalities, and of course the economy doesn't know anything about a boundary between a municipality. Tourists don't know which is Cape Town and which is Stellenbosch. The economy doesn't know, and I don't know whether you say, when you get to Stellenbosch, hang on a second, I'm only going to grow my business in Cape Town, I'm not going to go over the municipal boundary. You don't say that. Thank you. But in the study for the EDP, it shows that, and this is also where I also get into trouble because George always jumps up and down, but 87% of the economy of the Western Cape is in 5 municipalities. Cape Town, Stellenbosch, Paarl, Swartland, and Saldanha Bay. That's the core of the economy of this province. And then the next blip, there's a slight blip over the mountain, which you've got Worcester and George. Those are the big economic players, and that's it. The other places are very small. And obviously we've got to make sure that we still allow business to happen in those places and we grow those places, because obviously when you don't grow a Beaufort West, what happens to people in Beaufort West? They come to Cape Town to look for jobs. So we've also got to make sure we grow the economy in Beaufort West. But from a business point of view, at the moment, the bulk of the economy sits in those 5 municipalities, which we call the city region. Now, I think I'm saying too much, and we're not going to get into action. A couple of the projects we're running with. One is called Red Tape to Red Carpet. I'll maybe say that for last. Skills Development Forum, key. What I need to know, and the Skills Development Forum needs to know, if you can't fill positions in your company. We find that our big finance houses are importing people in the business analyst space from India. Now we've got 24% unemployment in this province, and we're importing services from India. Doesn't make sense, guys. But when you speak to them, they say, but we can't find those skills yet. But they're not telling anybody. So we've done an intervention last year where we've brought in 30 graduates. These are people who finished studying, who can't find work, which is quite scary too. But we brought them in, rejigged, and they are now working in some of these finance houses, but through the Graduate School of Business, developing themselves into business analysts. And the process has worked so well that they've now committed for next year for 300 students just from that sector of the economy. But that's because there was an intervention and we heard about it. Now the Skills Development Forum is where we bring business, labour, municipalities, government, and our higher education learning, our technicons together to sit around the table and say, let's first of all be demand-led. What can't you fill? We need to know that. So please, I ask you, get involved in the Skills Development Forum. And then perhaps I must just talk about the IDZ. I think it's one of the new exciting projects that are available. The Industrial Development Zone in Saldanha Bay. The study's been coming on a long time. Just talking about oil and gas, $220 billion worth of servicing to the oil and gas industry is what the market is for the next 5 years around the coast of Africa. Servicing the oil and gas industry around the coast of Africa, $220 billion in the next 5 years. It's a lot of money. How much of it are we going to get? How much of that business is ours? So Saldanha is key, and Cape Town, but Saldanha is key in the development of Saldanha, balancing it with the Port of Cape Town in getting that business. But we've got to become more efficient. We are slack. I promise you we're slack. I got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning a couple of months ago. An oil rig booked in to be serviced in Cape Town. The harbour master in Cape Town said, sorry, we've already got a rig in the harbour, you can't come in. This company starts jumping up and down. They phone me 2 o'clock in the morning. We get somebody on a plane at 6 o'clock the next morning, flies all the way to Scotland because the big guys from the US were going there for a conference. This guy gets on his knees in Scotland in front of the MD of Chevron and his team and says, please, 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 we know Cape Town's turned you away, please, Saldanha Bay. You're on your way to they were going to Wolfers. Saldanha Bay, please, please, please. And we pulled that rig into Saldanha Bay after a lot of begging. It was 230 million rands worth of job and 1,800 people worked on that rig. Now we nearly lost it. 132 rigs passed our coastline in the last year, and we've serviced 3. 132 could have been, okay, well, to get from 0 to 132 is impossible. But we should be servicing not 3, 8, 12. And it should not be Saldanha, it's Saldanha Bay, Cape Town, Mossel Bay, Kucha, you name it. All of our ports should be pulling in on this. I'm pleased to say that it's actually the priority number 1 on the agenda of MINMEC at a national level now after the presentation of 3 of these vessels. We did it to Ibrahim Patel and Rob Davies. It's now the item number 1 on the agenda, and oil and gas is a major, major effort, not only now for the Western Cape, which it's always been seen as, it's now included in IPAP 2, and it's now seen as a serious piece of business that we as South Africa have to do and have to make an offering to the rest of Africa. Whether we find more gas or oil in our coastline doesn't matter, but let's offer that service, because that's what Singapore did, and have a look at what they've done in the world. And perhaps that's where I want to end off until we get into some interaction. Red tape to red carpet. What have I, and I'll say I, what has government passed in the way of a law or a regulation that's in your way for you doing business? I need to know about it. Red tape to red carpet. If there's stuff that we are doing that stops you from getting profit, growing your business and employing people, tell me. So, red tape at pgwc.gov.za. Send me a mail or phone me on my cell. Send me a tweet. Tell me what's getting in your way. Because we can only grow an efficient country if we remove the red tape. Okay, you might talk about some red tape that I might say to you, listen, we've analyzed this and we're not going to move it out the way because it's put there for a reason. It's put there for a reason to achieve a goal, to protect an environment, to do whatever it's supposed to do. But we need to get rid of the red tape that's slowing you down from doing business. And I said I'm going to end here. I've just come back from Singapore and I met with their organization called the IDA, and their job was to streamline efficiencies over the last couple of years in Singapore. For the last 6 years, they've been rated as the most efficient government in the world. Number one. And you have a look at what they've done, it just blows your mind. I mean, sometimes I listen to them, I look at their presentations, I read their documentation, and I think, jeepers, will we ever get there? So, in New Zealand, which I've always rated as a great place to start a business, it takes 2 days to start a business. And the reason I went to Singapore is I suddenly saw Rwanda also took 2 days to start a business. It takes 2 days in Rwanda to start a business right now. Why? They went to Singapore to find out what they do in Singapore. Now, I know Singapore was always efficient. Today, how long do you think it takes to start a business? Register a business in Singapore. 2 hours. It takes 2 hours to register a business. When you look at their efficiencies on planning, now, I mean, when we talk about red tape, I'm sure 50,000 questions are going to come on planning and EIAs. And in 2009, they brought it from 35 days to 24 days. Last year, they took it from 24 days down to 15 or 16 days. That's planning. This year, whether they achieve it or not, we'll see, but their target is 7 days. When you put a planning application in, you must get an answer within 7 days. The aim is within 7 days you must get your answer. If you don't get it, it's deemed approved. How's that for putting pressure on officials? Deemed approved. You don't comment on this thing, I'm sorry, passed. Now imagine if we could get there. They've got a system called one form. Do you know that in Singapore you only ever fill in one form? If the first interaction you have with government is an ID book, and you fill in that form, you filled in your form for your tax form, for your car license, for your registration of your house bond, you only fill in one form ever. You might attach other documentation or other items to it, but you only fill in one form. And e-filing, I mean, one thing with SARS is we're pretty good, but you don't do e-filing there anymore, so you don't send your stuff in, they send it to you. And the only time you interact with their SARS is if you don't agree with what they say. Because nothing, okay, it's a bit Big Brother, but nothing happens with the central database knowing about it. So if you buy a house or sell a house, you buy a car, sell a car, you earn an extra bit of money from somewhere, the system knows about it, and your tax is taxed accordingly. Seriously efficient. They're coming to see us in December, and I've arranged that they're going to present to the Cabinet. But I've also arranged that the red tape team and whomever else in government, primarily the planning guys, are also going to receive a presentation from these guys to say, what are we going to do to try and start to move towards these number 1s and 2s and 3s and 4s in finance and governance, that we actually start to get it in government and government delivery. Because the other stuff, we all sit right at the bottom. And that's enough from me now. Let's get into some questions. What are some of the issues you want to talk about? Maybe it's regeneration, maybe it is planning. Over to you. I can't have covered everything. And you business people, you don't need to get home to watch a soapy.
How business people sitting here will be drawn into this.
Okay.
And I know that the previous development agency council on paper looked good, but in effect I don't think that's delivered what it needs, and I think that is why it's now been phased out. I presume that is why.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say that we mustn't conflate the two things, the Provincial Development Council, PDC, which is what you're talking about, the previous thing, and the EDP. Two different things. The PDC is a social dialogue mechanism where government, civil society, business and labour come together to talk about issues and to, it's a dialogue space. We are busy with the process saying we spent 50 million on that in the last 8-9 years. That's how much government has spent on it. What have we got out of that in the last 8-9 years? And we're asking about value for money, and we're cutting because we're getting less money. So that came out of that process, and that's a different thing, and we're busy still. It's in the legislature. They're having open sessions on it, etc., etc. Although there might be seen to be similarities because of an economic development agency or partnership, this is purely about the economics. It's purely about the economy of this region. So it does affect everybody. It affects all role players, but it's solely about the economy. And the business organizations, and that's why I know how many there are, because we've tried to consult with every single one of these business organizations. So if you do belong to a business organization, please find out about the EDP process. You can pull down the document, you can read it, you can interact with Andrew Borain, you can interact with my office on it. And the idea is, how do we bring the economy together in the interest of the economy to do just a few things? We need to understand more about the economy. I started speaking about the business brand versus the tourism brand. But we've got the top universities in Africa right here, and we don't use them. We don't use those universities to the optimum of growing our economy. We kind of talk to them. But how do we bring our universities, our businesses? We've got businesses that are global players. We've got businesses that are trying to emerge. How do we bring all of this together and say, what do we need to do instead of 50,000 things? What are the 3 things we're going to focus on for the next 5 years to take this economy to the next phase? And I can decide on oil and gas, beneficiation, tourism, and a couple of sectors. But we all need to decide that. And then we need to say, I think primarily what to say no to. Then what is the model going to look like? It is in the process of developing. I don't know what the model is going to look like. The consultation is telling us it's changing it over time. And I don't know if this is going to work. Because in my mind, I want it to be owned by business and not by government. But I don't know if that's going to work. I'm going to try it. And if business wants to bite, I'll give it to them. So let's form a company, and I'll take 49%. And I'll put the money in. How does that make sense? I'll put the money in, and I'll take 49%. And in 5 years' time, well, I'll be bankrupt if I'll do that. In 5 years' time, then let's talk about how much money business is going to put into it. And let's make sure, because that's also the other prerequisite. Everybody's saying, well, should it be a statutory body? Should it be? I think there should be one prerequisite, and that is, I will give X amount of money per year to it, and it's got to do and perform a certain number of jobs. If it doesn't perform those jobs, I'll just stop the money. So let's look at the convention centre. The convention centre is an entity that performs. And it does well. And it's grown. It's one of very few convention centres in the world that is showing a profit. And that's why we're prepared to put more money into it, to double its size, so we can bring more business tourism and more conferences to this region. It's done exceptionally well. And when things do well, politicians don't break them. Politicians leave them to do what they do. And that must be the brief. This economic development agency, let's get business involved with government, and let's make it do well. Let's create it and create the opportunity for it to do well and fly and direct and manage the economy going forward, to tell government where we're going wrong, pull business together so that we're not so fragmented. And let's focus on a few things and do them very well so that we can add efficiencies to this listing that I spoke about earlier. And so I'm not that keen on saying we need to tie it up in all sorts of regulation. Let's make it free and able to move. And I'll stop the money if it doesn't work. And I promise you'll stop the money if it doesn't work as well. So it's got to succeed. We've got to put the right people there and make it fly. And then everybody will support it. And that's got to be our thing. But it's still evolving. If you've got input you want to put into it, please, even if you want to call a meeting like this, we'll come and do a full presentation on it. And it's still in that process. I'm hoping to have the company set up and the process set up by the new financial year. My legal people, and they all start saying, they'll find all sorts of excuses why we can't do things. So that's why I have to have all these meetings every now and again to say, come on, let's get moving, because we need to move. Now's the time. Now's the time if you're in business to invest. Now's the time if you're in business to train your people. Now's the time to do all those things that you've never got enough time to do when you're busy. Because I don't know how many of you are too busy at the moment to think about those things. It's tough at the moment. It's really tough. And so now we mustn't look inwards, we must look outwards. And we must start to plan for being that new innovative business space. And hopefully that's one of the agencies, one of the organizations that can help us get our minds going in the right direction. Yes, and the organization that's running with it is the Cape Town Partnership. So it's Andrew Borain and Yumna Furfree. And feel free to phone them, engage with them, and if you get no answer, you phone me.
Any more questions?
Can't be. I'll say it again. What can I do for you? Aha.
More comment. It's I think the issue that businesses face is the cost of business. And linking to the cost of business is issues around tax is the one big cost of business, but also the issue about administered pricing and all of those things, and it's linking to the issue with job creation. The government expects business to create jobs, but the sentiment that I get is that a lot of business owners are so frustrated with the cost of business and the cost of living, and whenever there is another cost going up, fuel goes up, so tomorrow I lay off another person. And I think that is what government needs to do, is it needs to start lowering the cost of living or cost of business, so that it allows business to have money available to actually start employing people, because at the moment it's sentiment. Business cost goes up, you lay off people.
It's a massive issue, and it's a whole mindset, and that's why I say we've got to do things differently. And I don't want to get into a political discussion here, but my opinion, and if you look at the models around the world, and you look at the last time Canada had quite a tough recession, the world had quite a tough recession. Canada was the first country to get out of the recession, and you have a look at what they did. They cut taxes. They didn't increase it. I have fights with my own colleagues in the cabinet to say, our own revenue generation is only 5%. They say, well, let's find ways to introduce new taxes. I'm saying, guys, why? Let's get rid of some taxes so that you guys have got more money to invest to create more jobs. That's how it should work. So it's trying to find that balance, and our tax rates are too high, I believe. They should be lower. They should be closer to 20% rather than 40%. But it's easy to just stand here and say those kind of things. It's a process, and it's a mindset, and it's about efficiencies. But also, I believe that we're also giving you the raw end of the deal, because you're getting your fuel prices have just gone up. Your electricity prices are not what you're used to; they're going through the roof. I think this is perhaps somewhere where we as business people need to start talking. Province saying it. Today we started discussing it in the cabinet. This higher than inflation rate wage increases, and I understand that we've got to correct imbalances from the past. But we're in a tough situation in South Africa at the moment, and we all got to put shoulders to the wheel. And this higher than inflation rate salary increases is not on. We can't carry on like that. Because every single time we do that, we put everybody under pressure. And so all of our input costs are going up, and the market out there is tough. It's very, very tough. I can't, as a provincial government, I can't really say to you, well, I'm going to go and make sure these and these and these change. I will argue the case, and I've got to do it strategically, and I've got to do it cleverly, and because I can't also, remember, I'm one person generally in a min-mec where, I don't say we're always on opposite sides of the fence, because when I get to specifically finance min-mecs, and you talk about division of revenue, all of a sudden KZN, Gauteng and the Western Cape are in one team, because we're the provinces that are seeing the extra numbers coming to our provinces looking for opportunities, and we're not getting the funding to come with it, so we're all fighting on the same side. So it's not as if it's sort of a political imbalance when we go to min-mecs, and so I will continue to fight that fight to say we've got to make it easier for business to do what business does. But also where we can, in municipal space and in provincial space, what is it that's getting in your way? Tell us. Let's create the platform so that you can do business easier. But then, of course, your side of the bargain is we've also got to try and become more and more efficient, and we've got to go and compete with the world out there. That's the Singapore model. I'm not sure if any of you have been to Singapore. If you haven't, go. Take a break, go to Singapore. Go and see what they do. They blow you. I promise you, you'll come back, you'll be energized, and you'll want to go that extra mile. They blow you away. The efficiency, everything is just amazing. And we need to get there. And we can. We can. Look at some of these results that we do as a country. We can do it. So, yeah.
Let's give Mr. Martin a final.
I've got one question, and yeah, this bothers me quite a bit. Are you guys saying that government will do work only with people that from 7th of December with the triple BEE? Is that what you're saying?
No, but you obviously have to. We apply the law.
Yeah.
So you must make sure that you register. At the moment, our big problem is we've got 37,000 SMMEs on our database. I don't know how many of them are accredited.
Yeah, but that brings me to our next question. You look at the main contractor and the subcontractor, or only the main contractor?
I know you have to look at the whole supply. The new regs, and
top to bottom.
It shows the whole supply.
Because CRDB was brought into being to look at everybody in construction, and that is not the case.
Yeah, but the new. I'll actually leave. I've got a copy of them here. If I'll leave them with you. The new system, you've got to be accredited. And we will only be able to do business with accredited companies. That's why I asked the question. 37,000 suppliers on our database. How many of them are accredited? Because you're going to cut yourself off at the knees when you apply for that. Okay, obviously it depends on where in the, if it's about, because now it moves it from 500,000 to 1 million, whether you're above the million or below the million. There's a whole lot of requirements. But the question is, first, you must be accredited, because otherwise you kick yourself out of the system.
One last question.
The bodies like INCETA, for instance, we've got expertise in the market, like accounting, financial services, but it's like knocking at a steel door to try and get funding. And I've battled for 5 years, and in that 5 years, I have one learner funded. Now that's ridiculous. Because you speak to the people at INCETA, for instance, they themselves say, we've got millions.
Which CETA is it?
INCETA, the Insurance Institute. But you just don't get funding. I've got young people phoning almost every day. I've got a stack of applications there. Young people want to learn, but the institutions, like what is your accounting? You just don't get assistance.
All right. Well, then you must talk to me.
Incompetent.
The one thing, I've got officials in my department who are quite good at getting money out of different parts. Because you see, we give them so little, so they've got to go and find it in other places. They get very good at it. So I'll leave you my card and send through a mail. I'll give it to our skills people. Let's see how we can help. Yeah, I'm happy.
Thanks. Good evening, Minister Winde and everybody. Trevor Martrup, and we from a company called Millicom Wireless. And you were referring right at the beginning and earlier, but on the BRICS and what's been happening in terms of relationships with those countries. And just less than a week ago, our company was invited from one of the BRICS organizations to come over in December to get a full training from them, because we've managed to secure the authorized distribution for not only South Africa but for Africa as well. And because of the relationship that we built up and with the clients that we've already started to service in the country here, they've invited us over where they will be willing to spend on us for our accommodation over there and some of our expenses over there. We just need to get there. And our company at the moment can afford to send 4 of the guys over. They require a minimum of 10 for the sort of repairing station sort of that they want to set up here in South Africa, and us being part of the BRICS, running it for them over here, so whereby we will be servicing the whole of Africa should there be any repairs. And the product that we're discussing here has got to do with the road safety of the country as well. We do mobile surveillance of vehicles, of moving trucks, buses, trains, and I then went last week to some of the institutions that government has set up place, leaders, the youth fund and all that sort of stuff, saying that we are willing as a company to give government a pilot run on putting one of these systems on one of your trains, one of your metro Golden Arrow buses, my city buses. We'll set up a little control room just for you to test the system on one condition. Sponsor the rest of the 6 guys to go over and get the training so that we can secure this fully. We're looking for about a 30-day period now. So we were talking about red tape earlier as well. Mr. Minister, can something like this be done within 30 days? Because everywhere we go, this is not going to be overnight. This is going to take so long. Because apparently there is funds available to send guys over to China or Brazil, wherever it might be. In this case, it's China, Shenzhen, to get training and to come back with government sponsors 80% of your expenses or anything like that. The quickest process.
Okay, I can't make you a promise, but grab my number now and I'll give you a number of someone you will speak to tomorrow morning.